Alrighty, welcome back to the second video in this little series reviewing the argument for seduction as represented in the red pill community, but of course represented in many other places as well. So today we're looking at the first principle of the argument, which is game is good. I've got a representative post that I use to explore this argument, and that will be linked below. You can find that below. Here's the claim, basically, that the seduction game has led us to discover the truth about women and about attraction and relationships, so therefore it is a good thing overall. So in order to convince somebody that seduction is good, you have to show that it provides value. And one of the arguments for seduction is that it helps you understand women, which will help you in relationships. So red pill, the community seems to really idolize the use of social tactics and strategies and manipulation to influence women into being attracted to you. They often hail the people who have sexually promiscuous lifestyles and claim that this is kind of a goal worth pursuing. It's good to get laid a lot, essentially, and game's going to help you do that. Red pill leaders, like I quoted a guy who calls himself Roosh V, I don't know if I'm saying that right. Many of them claim to have since put away their promiscuous ways. They've had their phase of fucking as many people as possible, and they put that away, perhaps for monogamy or a more stable sex life, but they still recommend the use of seduction traits, even though they might no longer really engage in much seduction. They claim that game and seduction taught them how to understand and handle women, and therefore it is a good phase of learning for a guy to go through. Now, first, I can concur with some of this. My years as a pickup artist, wannabe seducer, certainly taught me a lot about female psychology, social dynamics, cultural norms, relationships between men and women. I learned a lot. I can't fault that argument. However, there are some problems with claiming that game and seduction is the savior of men and a great educator for men. And there are some assumptions that this argument is based on that I want to challenge. Assumption number 1. Seductive promiscuous men will acquire important knowledge about relationships that they otherwise would not discover. So they make an argument that if you go out there and be a promiscuous seducer, you'll learn a lot of information that you simply can't learn any other way. It is the way to learn. While it's undeniable that game can help people make discoveries, there's no evidence that this is the best way to make those discoveries, and that men must and should walk this path to learn about dating and relationships. You know, in my work as a coach, I've seen many men successfully skip any sort of game seduction phase, go straight to having integrity with women, and through that have learned how to interact and build relationships. Conversely, I've also seen men who have engaged in a lot of seduction. I'm personal friends with a lot of dating coaches and stuff. And even though they're now getting into their 40s and 50s, they're still single and unable to maintain a long-term relationship. So the idea that they actually learned anything about relationships is debatable. They learned how to get laid, but that's not the same as maintaining a healthy relationship. Which matches my experience. I'm now engaged to be married to the absolute love of my life. But while I was really good at seducing, I couldn't hold down a relationship for more than a few weeks. When you're applying integrity with women, you will learn about women and you will learn about relationships. There will be backlash to your integrity. You will be rejected, you'll have bad experiences, you'll have negative reactions, but through all of that you'll learn and you'll develop wisdom. You'll also learn that you don't need game. You'll learn that a woman can be attracted to you as long as you're not trying to make her attracted to you. And that's essentially what integrity is all about. You being you rather than you being something that's attractive. No game is required for this learning process. It's a fallacy to assume that all men must go through this game phase. Though, I will admit there are some guys who won't believe me when I'm trying to work with them around integrity, and they need to go through a game phase to realize that it's not going to answer all their questions. They basically need for it to not work before they'll try something new. And perhaps that's an argument for game. To claim that game is a good way to learn about women, that it's effective and helpful, is unproven. And the reasoning seems to be mostly based on what's called the bandwagon fallacy. All these red pill guys, it worked for them and their friends, so they assume it will work for everybody. That's like saying one diet will work for everybody because it worked for you. Or saying one currency should work for the whole world because it works for your country. It's just because other people you know approve of it doesn't mean it actually works well. Assumption number 2 is the idea that game actually works. That seduction is an effective way to make women attracted to you. That seems to go without saying. They always beg that question, like you must learn seduction. It kind of implies that the seduction is actually effective and successful. So let's assume you are materialistic, you just want to get laid. They beg the question as to whether or not seduction is even the best way to do that. Which is ironic because in my experience and the experience of many guys I've worked with, their love lives flourished after they stopped trying to be seductive and focused on being very bold and honest and courageous instead. So claiming that game works effectively is unproven. The idea that many men are successfully dating and getting laid because they use seduction is unproven. It's unsupported by any form of evidence. But, you look at the marketing for the seduction community and they say things like how to be a player and how to fill your bed with women and stuff, and then they claim that they also do this. It gives you the impression that the idea that seduction works goes without question. You just need to get good at it, There are some groups within the manosphere have actually formed because seduction's ineffective. There's one called PUA Hate, which actually got registered as an official hate group in the States and had to rename itself to the lovely name of Slut Hate. They came together just to complain and commiserate about the false promise of seduction, about how it never worked for them. In my experience when I was in the pickup artist community, I went home empty-handed most of the time. Most of the people I approached and initiated a conversation with using seduction turned me away. And when I say most, I just mean more than 50%. My success rate, I was on a lot of online forums at the time chatting with other guys, hundreds, thousands of other guys doing this, and they considered my success rate to be successful, to be doing well. And yet it was filled with rejection and lots of pain. When I started being more honest and having integrity instead, I noticed a different thing which I call polarization. It wasn't really a rejection, it's just people didn't like me, or they did like me. I didn't ask them for anything, I wasn't requesting anything that could be rejected. I was just being myself, and they would stay and want to talk to me more, or they would leave. So it was a completely different measure of success. But I felt more successful being honest and having integrity. I could go home alone and feel like I lived up to my own standards. Whereas with seduction, I had to go home with someone to feel like I was successful in life. So it depends what you mean by successful, but even if you mean getting laid a lot, there's no proof that seduction's actually a good way of doing that. A third assumption, and there's a huge one for the red pill community, is the idea that all women are the same, and in particular that the women who respond positively to game and seduction are representative of all women. So it's a common theme throughout red pill that women are psychologically the same, which is interesting because red pill guys often complain about feminism lumping all men together as being the same. The hashtag not all men. So red pill guys on one hand will get really miffed about feminism saying all men are the same, and then they're happy to say all women are the same and commit the same fallacy. Just because some women in some situations are seduced by tactics does not mean that all women are easily seduced or that seduction is a good approach to interacting with all women. It's a really grand claim made on almost no evidence whatsoever. Again, we have this bandwagon fallacy where all these guys said, I went to a nightclub and hit on this drunk chick using this technique and she went home with me. Therefore, this works on all women. It's a really big claim to make off a really unreliable piece of evidence, and they do it a lot. When I first came into this review for Red Pill, I was expecting to see a lot of citations because Red Pill was really big on science, on rationality, on evolutionary psychology. I expected to see study after study after study. What I heard instead was references to principles without citations. So it's like, as we know from evolutionary psychology, women respond to this. I'm like, well, what study are you talking about? What book are you referring to? There was no citations. It doesn't mean that this information doesn't exist, but I wonder where they're getting it from. Because what I heard is some guy citing some other guy who cited some other guy, and I can't actually find the true source of this information. And I studied psychology. I have a degree in psychology, and I'm a huge enthusiast of evolutionary psychology. And a lot of the claims they're making, I've never heard before in that field. Doesn't mean they're not there, but I think somebody's making up some shit, basically. And I think what's happening is that the Red Pill are making really big claims about seduction based on the experiences of a few members in their community with a small sample selection of women. And that is not a claim that you can use on all women. You just can't. Evolutionary psychology has never made the claim that all women are the same psychologically. Just like they've never made the claim that all men are the same or that all people are the same. So the idea that this comes from evolutionary psychology is faulty. So my conclusions. If game is responsible for good discoveries, that doesn't necessarily mean that game itself is good. Okay, so even if game is a good way to learn about women and relationships, it doesn't mean you should do it. I had a look at some other studies, Milgram's experiment around authority. We've got, what's the guy with Z? He did the Stanford prison, Zimbardo did the Stanford prison experiment. These experiments yielded some very helpful information about human psychology, but they destroyed the minds of the people who went through the experiment. And I believe the same equivalency applies to game. Game might teach you a lot about women, but at what cost? One of the reasons I gave up seduction is because of how many hearts I broke. I'm not saying I'm a player or anything, but I really fucked with people's heads in order to learn seduction, and that was really uncool of me to do. I could learn about relationships and women and social interaction without destroying people and without manipulating them. So I don't see a justification for game coming through clearly here. And I certainly don't see it coming through clearly on the idea that because it worked for a few guys, it must work for all of them. What if those few guys are psychopaths? Is it still applicable? Because I think many of the guys, the leaders in Red Pills, show a lot of strong signs of psychopathy. And I'll talk more about that in a later video. So, that is my argument against the principle that game is good, that it's a noble pursuit of some kind. And in the next video, I will look at the idea that game is necessary, that we need seduction to protect men from the risks inherent in interacting with women. I'll see you there.